Welcome back to our 10-part series on the timeless classic, How to Win Friends and Influence People. This is video number 5. Today, we're diving straight into the deep end, focusing on the 4th chapter of part 3. The principle we'll be discussing is, the only way to get the best of an argument is to avoid it. Now, I know what you're thinking. Avoid arguments, but I love a good debate. Trust me, there's a method to the madness. You see, arguments are like quicksand. The more you struggle, the deeper you sink. So, the best course of action? Don't step into the quicksand in the first place. Arguments, more often than not, lead to dead ends, hurt feelings, and damaged relationships. And let's be honest, who has time for that? Instead, imagine a world where you steer clear of arguments. You're not avoiding conflict. No. Rather, you're choosing to engage in more meaningful, productive conversations. You're choosing to listen, to understand, and to empathize. And in doing so, you're not only winning friends, but also influencing people. Now let's add a dash of humor to lighten the mood. Here's a funny anecdote for you. There was once a man who was so argumentative, he would only eat food that disagreed with him. Can you imagine? Living your life in a constant state of disagreement, even with your meals. And if that doesn't tickle your funny bone, here's a quote from the great Mark Twain, who said, "It is better to keep your mouth closed and let people think you are a fool than to open it and remove all doubt." So the next time you find yourself gearing up for an argument, remember Twain's words. Maybe it's best to keep your mouth closed, listen, understand, and steer the conversation towards a more productive path. Remember folks, the only way to win an argument is to sidestep it altogether. Moving on to the next chapter, a principle that's sure to get you thinking. Now picture this. You're in the middle of a heated debate with a friend. You're absolutely convinced that your point of view is the correct one. Your friend, however, sees things differently. What do? Do you steamroll over their perspective, insisting they're wrong? Or do you pause, take a step back, and show respect for their viewpoint? This is exactly what Chapter 5 of our journey through How to Win Friends and Influence People is about. It's a simple principle, yet it's one that can drastically change the dynamics of our interactions. The principle is this: show respect for the other person's opinions. Never say, "You're wrong." This principle is not about surrendering your beliefs or abandoning your standpoint. Instead, it's about creating a space where differing opinions can coexist, fostering an environment of mutual respect. It's about validating the other person's perspective even if you don't agree with it. This doesn't mean you have to change your opinion. Rather, it's about acknowledging that other viewpoints exist and that they are just as valid as yours. Now, let's add a dash of humor to our discussion. Imagine you're arguing with a friend about the best superhero. You're a die-hard Batman fan, while your friend swears by Spider-Man. You could launch into a tirade about Batman's superior gadgets, his cool car, and his brooding personality. But instead you pause, chuckle, and say, "Well, I can see why you'd be drawn to a guy who can swing from buildings with a thread of silk. That's pretty cool." In this light-hearted scenario, you've demonstrated respect for your friend's opinion. You haven't agreed with them, but you've acknowledged their viewpoint, and that's powerful. It's this recognition that allows for a healthy exchange of ideas, fostering a sense of respect and understanding, even amidst disagreements. Applying this principle in real-life situations can lead to more productive conversations and healthier relationships. It can bridge gaps, mend fences, and even turn adversaries into allies. When we show respect for others' opinions, we invite them to do the same for ours. So the next time you're locked in a debate, remember this principle. The next time you're tempted to dismiss someone else's perspective, recall the power of respect. Instead of saying "you're wrong," consider saying "I see your point," or "that's an interesting perspective." In doing so, you're not just winning an argument, you're winning respect, understanding, and possibly a stronger relationship. So the next time you're tempted to say "you're wrong," pause and consider the power of respect. Now we come to the 6th chapter, a principle that's all about the power of concession. It's a principle that might be a bit of a tough pill to swallow for some of us, but it's an essential one nonetheless. It's the principle that says, if you are wrong, admit it quickly and emphatically. Now I can already see some of you raising your eyebrows and looking skeptical. Admit I'm wrong? But that's admitting defeat, you might be thinking. But let's clear up a common misconception. Admitting you're wrong isn't about accepting defeat, it's about acknowledging a mistake and taking responsibility. It's about showing humility, and believe it or not, humility is a strength, not a weakness. In fact, it's a quality that often leads to greater respect and influence. When you admit you're wrong, you're showing others that you're self-aware, that you're willing to learn, and that you value truth over ego. And that's a powerful thing. Let me share a funny little anecdote to illustrate this. Picture this. One day, I was having a heated debate with a friend about whether the Earth is flat or round. Now, I'm a bit of a prankster, so I decided to argue that the Earth is flat, just for laughs. The debate went on for a good while, with me citing all sorts of pseudo-scientific mumbo-jumbo. But then, my friend pulled out the ultimate trump card, a picture of the Earth taken from space. I could have been stubborn and continued to argue, but instead, I burst out laughing, admitted I was wrong, and conceded the argument. And you know what? My friend didn't gloat or make fun of me. Instead, he laughed along with me, and we ended up having a great time. In that moment, I wasn't seen as weak or foolish for admitting I was wrong. Instead, I was seen as someone who could take a joke, admit their mistakes, and not take themselves too seriously. And that's exactly the kind of influence we're talking about. There's a saying that goes, a man must be big enough to admit his mistakes, smart enough to profit from them, and strong enough to correct them. And that's what this principle is trying to teach us. So the next time you find yourself in a situation where you're clearly in the wrong, don't dig in your heels. Instead, admit your mistake quickly and emphatically. You might just be surprised at the respect and influence it earns you. Remember, admitting you're wrong doesn't make you weak, it makes you wise. Before we wrap up, let's quickly recap what we've learned today. We journeyed through chapters 4, 5, and 6 from part 3, How to Win People to Your Way of Thinking, of the legendary book, How to Win Friends and Influence People. In chapter 4, we explored the power of asking questions rather than giving direct orders. Remember, no one likes to take orders. It's far more effective to make suggestions and let others come to the conclusion themselves. It's like the old saying, you can lead a horse to water, but you can't make it drink. But if you make the horse thirsty, well, that's a different story. Moving on to chapter 5, we discovered the importance of saving face. We all make mistakes, but it's crucial to allow others to preserve their dignity even when they're wrong. It's a delicate balance, like juggling eggs. Drop one, and you've got a messy situation on your hands. And finally, chapter 6 reminded us to praise every improvement, no matter how small. Positive reinforcement is the key to encouraging change. It's like watering a plant. You wouldn't expect it to grow without a little sunshine and water, would you? Now, let's inject a little humor into our recap. Imagine trying to apply these principles to a cat, asking questions. Cats have their own minds. Saving face. A cat has 9 lives and doesn't worry about face saving. And praising every improvement. Well, every cat owner knows that's a one-way street. These principles might not work on our feline friends, but they're incredibly effective when dealing with people. They're not just strategies. They're ways of showing empathy, respect, and a genuine interest in others. And that's a wrap for today. If you found this video helpful, don't forget to like, share, and subscribe. Until next time, keep learning, keep growing, and remember, the best way to win friends and influence people is to be genuinely interested in them.